Well, we might as well just keep this rolling. I'm already rolling audio and in video.
You just recorded that? Oh, shit.
That's probably going to make some clips.
We'll cut a little bit of that out.
Think about it. Yeah, you can take parts out, but we don't want to get in trouble on that one.
Right. PC. Our non-PC talk before we recording.
Yeah. But, here we are, Gentleman Badass Podcast. I'm Josh. We've got Mick as usual. Today you got a good friend of mine, good friend of Mick's, good friend of the gym, and a fantastic artist.
Thank you so much,
Dave
guys.
Koenig. Dave.
Hey, I'm grateful to be here with you guys. I have immense respect for you guys. Mick, probably for years and years and years.
For a long time.
The 90s, I think, when I first heard about you and stuff. So
just a pup. You were just a pup. Never mind me.
I was a pup.
What age are you now?
46 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I almost got 10 years on you.
Yeah. Well, we usually like to start at the beginning. So kind of where you were, maybe back in the 90s, maybe before then, growing up, what your early life was like. Maybe some points that stick out in that era of your life.
Well, pretty simple. I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I was born out here. I've moved away a few times, but some Omaha, Midwest, love it. Kind of sucks you back in. But I grew up out here. As far as my youth, I was pretty laid back, easygoing kid. I kind of found drawing back when I was like I think I was in first or second grade. I remember my sister drew an amazing drawing. She's 3 years older than me, and my parents were just like, "Oh, it's amazing, amazing." I remember I drew something, and my dad was just like, "All right, well, keep working at it, buddy." And something there worked as an ignition, and that's what got me to kind of, transform my perception on how I was going to look at drawing. Something worked as an ignition and made me want to identify myself with that specific skill set. So I instead of looking at every time I drew something wrong as a failure, I just started looking at like a learning lesson. And I don't know, I got a little obsessed. Maybe there was something there. I just was like, oh yeah, I'm going to show you, And so, so I've always been drawing, and that's kind of where it started. But I did, sway away from it a few times in life because, people get into something at a young age and they do it for so long that sometimes then they get tired of it, burnt out, and then they'll fall away from it. But for some reason, it kind of brings you back in, and I don't know. I mean, my youth is pretty uneventful in that sense. Yeah. Bringing it to a martial arts level. I'm a 80s, 90s kid. I grew up when the days we used to play outside and roughhouse. You guys know how it is. Drink water from the garden hose. It's like, you had a problem with even your friends and you squashed it with fists. I'm not saying it was the right way, but I'm saying I'm glad I came up that way. It's different these days, and I don't know. I find it harder. I think it's harder for kids these days in some sense, but I don't know. That's kind of my premises. Definite Midwest boy.
Okay. Yeah. So martial arts. What was your about when did you start, and what was your first martial art?
So I was 13 years old. I was always into comic books and stuff, and so I enjoyed play fight and, foreshadowing what we were just saying with, growing up in the times we did. That was when cartoons were all violent, and so, violence was just kind of a natural thing. But I think, I had some troubles when I was probably around that junior high age and had some issues, got beat up a bit, and then was, it seemed like the guys a year ahead of me were just always beating me up. And finally, I remember my parents were like, they wanted me to do a sport. And I remember back then thinking, I was like, well, if I'm getting my ass kicked by all the football players and athletic kids, instead of playing baseball or something, I might as well make my sport fighting, that way then, then I can beat them up because I'm not throwing a ball. I'm figuring out how to throw a fist, So back then, and I don't even know what year it was back then, I'd probably say it was late 80s. I got into, I remember it was Sensei Robert Pickett it was like a Konan Ryu karate. started with him, and that was the rough
Was he
days.
the guy that was a dog trainer too?
Yeah, he was a dog trainer.
Yeah,
I think he got in some trouble.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
He was I started with him, and I mean, it was, how traditional martial arts were back then. It was like, he had us, I think for my black belt testing, I had to break a bat with the shin. At that age, I think I was like 14 by then, I remember, out in the snow barefoot doing katas and, hitting bricks with leather on them to condition your hands, and
Makiwara.
yeah, and then I can't remember what happened. I think there was some trouble with him that he had legally.
Yeah.
And so then I went over to Sensei Dan Hirsch with a Gojo-Ryu karate. And then he got in trouble too. So I was just having a bad run with these kind of guys, man. And it definitely tainted like my perspective on some of the traditional martial arts trainers at the time, and not all of them are like that. But yeah, I was at his place for a while, trained there for years, did a bunch of, did some tournaments and did some kickboxing. Well, not really kickboxing, like karate, kickboxing. Yeah. And then, and then I bet it was a few years into it. I remember we had some tournament. I fought. I did really well. I placed in it. And then after that, they were like, oh, can you spar this girl? And, just like an exhibition, match. And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And I remember, she was a little older than me, but I think I was bigger than her. We got in there and no one told me that she was a Muay Thai fighter. And in fact, at the time, I don't think I think I was kind of ignorant to know what Muay Thai was, And I remember we started and we went in there and she threw one of them switch kicks right into the side of my sciatic or my leg. And it was just like, damn, man, I was just like, I'm done. Like, that was it. I was feeling pretty badass. And then that really it humbled me. And, from there, then I started trying to search out more like Muay Thai, learn more about that. With the karate, I was also doing a little bit of, trying the weapon stuff and things. It was fun. I just love martial arts, and I loved the movies. I loved, of course, I grew up on Bruce Lee. I mean, I always like to say Bruce Lee and Indiana Jones taught me how to be a man.
Not a bad combo.
Yeah, no, yeah, I did that for years. Then I started looking for some of the Muay Thai. I want to say back in '94, maybe I did a couple classes with you. And
was that down in Benson?
Yeah, it was in Benson. Yeah. You guys were far too tough.
Benson, man, that was a wild place.
Well, Benson, and then I ended up back out to Benson back when it was like Street Smart or something. Or I ended up back out, but because then I went over to, just because it was a little bit closer, I went and worked with a guy named Bernard with some of the Jeet Kune Do. Was it Damone, who was the boxer?
Oh, yeah, Damone, right.
Those guys over at, it was on 120th and Center. I want to say it was like DOA Boxing, but there was another name for the whole school. So I was there for quite a while. And got to train with a lot of different types of people. Moving on from there, I can't even think. Yeah, I did that. Started doing more of the kickboxing. Then from kickboxing, I was also doing, I also wrestled a little bit in high school. And then, but the ground fighting, I was like, when I started seeing UFC in '93, and I remember watching it because Bill Superfoot was the announcer. And I love Bill Superfoot, and I remember watching it and then seeing Hoist Gracie, the Gracies, and then seeing what was happening with that. And I was like, okay, I should work on ground game, And in the meantime, I think I would start doing capoeira. So I started doing capoeira Angola Palmeiras, and that was with Leslie Green. And then, of course, then I was training here and there over at that Street Smart out in Benson with Greg James and those guys, Ed Chope and Ed Matthews.
Yeah.
Those Ed Chope and Ed Matthews were awesome. I loved rolling with those guys. They were super patient and
Ed
they helped me out a lot, man. Yeah, and at that one, I remember that's when I was like, I got to really start doing more jujitsu because they had me spar against some 14-year-old kid. And they were like, we can't do leg kicks, and stuff. And I was like, all right. And I didn't know that it was going to be like, we're even going to the ground. And man, the kid tapped me out. He was 14, got my back and choked. And I was just like, God, So, with that, I was just like, okay, I know I got to do more of it. But I think that I let my ego get in the way. And I think I always had excuses not to do jujitsu. I just wanted to throw hands and trained over there. And then I started training. I was doing the capoeira. The capoeira, we were meeting over on Mount Moriah Church on like 24th and Lake, and we'd train in the basement there. And that was a lot of fun. Capoeira helped me a lot with, being more elliptical and circular when I move, because with the karate background, everything's
so
very
stiff
linear.
and rigid, yeah.
But moved on from there. Let me think. Oh, and then I met a guy named. Well, I started getting into tattooing around then, so this would have been in 2001, maybe. And then I met a guy who was getting a Jeet Kune Do symbol, and I was like, "Man, I'm a fan of Bruce Lee, man. Where you train?" He's like, "Yeah," and he told me about a gentleman named Tom Casey. So I started training with him and those guys. And that was like a backyard, pretty much like a backyard brawl. We were meeting at my buddy Sean's house and we'd meet on Sunday mornings early, which at that time I was partying pretty hard, living the wild lifestyle. So it was like I was either showing up hungover or still drunk. And they would just he would find guys to come over and we were just pretty much brawling in the backyard. He did a lot of he taught us a lot of the trapping, the Jeet Kune Do. A lot of what he was pulling from came from Paul Vunak. He trained a lot with Paul. Yeah. I bet it was a couple years and then he was like giving me kind of an instructor certificate. And I remember feeling like there's got to be more to this than that, and then, in the meantime, I ran into Dean Truax, who I still train with now. It's been almost 2 decades. I just happened to see Dean at the gym, and he had a Dan Inosanto shirt on. And I was like, well, this guy knows, if he knows Dan Inosanto, and it's in Omaha, because not many people. And so I approached him, and I told him, I was like, well, I've been training Jeet Kune Do concepts, and I didn't know the wealth of knowledge that Dean had. I mean, this dude's just... Dean was just a martial arts geek since he was little. I mean, he's got pictures of him training with Dan Inosanto at like 12, and it's like, and he still does. He's still out there. He just trained with him a couple months ago out in LA. And so then at that point, I talked to Tom and I told him I wanted to, train with Dean. And I started training with Dean with Jeet Kune Do, the Indonesian Silat. They have a lot of the Russian Sambo, which, he trained with Gokor and those. I've been at the Inosanto Academy a couple times, trained with him, and then that also introduced me to like Jean-Jacques Machado, and then training. There's been a lot. Eric Polson, a bunch of the different guys those guys all trained together, and but in the meantime, I think I was still kind of ignorant to jiu-jitsu. I remember Dean like, we should do jiu-jitsu. And I was like, I'm good with the kickboxing. Let's do this. I think I was still salty. And it was dumb, and then, I don't know. It was years ago. I was then I moved to Florida for a little bit. When I moved to Florida, I went to American Top Team. Okay. And then, when I was there, I got to meet a lot of cool fighters. Got to meet like Kimbo Slice, a bunch of those guys. And then, basically I couldn't afford it at the time. It was in 2008, so the economy kind of crashed. I just moved out there. And so Mateo, which he was Brazilian, and he was one of the teachers there, he's just like, come to my house. So I started training in his garage with him, and only like once or twice a week. But some of the Brazilians, you go there, you hang out, and you roll, smoke some weed, roll. It was just like, that's just the lifestyle, and they're great guys, man. Oh yeah, they surf, and I was like, I ain't surfing, but those guys were amazing. I learned a good amount from them, and then I realized something. I realized that when I was out there, I was okay with doing jujitsu, and I think it's because maybe I have an ego or something in town here where I felt like I was a tough guy, so I had to maintain that image. So then when I was out there, I didn't care, and I was like, yeah, just and then I remember I had to move back to Omaha, was running out of money out of there, and then came back to Omaha, started training with Dean again, and then met, what was it? Well, and then I was out in Pittsburgh tattooing, and we went to a Henzo Gracie school, and I was out there with a few buddies of mine that are tattooers, and I mean, I was like, I can probably hold my own. They were just rolling me up, and I was just like, all right, I really got to get back in this game. And I was at a point in my life where I was like, I don't like getting hit. So then I got back and started taking jiu-jitsu a little more serious, finally gave to that point where I was like, with nothing to lose, with nothing to prove, there's nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. So I started just going in to lose. And then eventually I started winning, and then it's funny because I was, like a 12-year white belt, maybe longer. And then, I remember the big brain guys, Dominic Holmes, Seth, Lenny, all those guys were like, hey, come roll with us over at Mix, And, man, I ain't gonna lie, man. I was like, I'm a little intimidated by Mick, that motherfucker's got some sort of stoic, thing about him. And I've known him from back in the 90s, and he was a badass,
I feel bad that we let you slip through our grasp in Maple Street Gym, but you're not alone. I lost so many potential good students from the mentality in that gym.
Dude,
but I will say,
I
was fighting too, and so it was kind of like it was my training, and whoever else could last. Great, we had a great tribe in there, but everybody was cannon fodder for me. And if you manage to stick around long enough, you'd get good. So I do feel bad. Like looking back, it wasn't necessary for us to train that way. But
but it was also a different mentality.
It was,
the martial arts gyms, man. It was,
But I hate hearing that when people go, yeah, back in the day, I went and trained with you, and I said, yeah, fuck that. And I was like, God, was it that bad? Like, was I a prick? Like, what?
That or we were all just pussies, I don't know, man.
I don't know.
No, I remember I came here with the big brain guys, rolled once, and then Seth, I started getting tattooed by Seth, and then I was tattooing him, and then he would just be like, you want to go roll? And I was like, yeah. And I even told him, I was like, if you want to come out to our school over at Omaha Kalia Martial Arts, and he's like, you ain't got no air conditioning. He's like, nope. He's like, oh, we'll go to Mix. And then, when I started coming here, and then I was embarrassed because Seth was like, Mick was wondering if you're sandbagging. And I was like, no, man, I haven't, I'm just a 10-year white belt. So it's like, I'm like, it probably looks that way because I've done some wrestling, but I know. And the thing about it, though, is it started rolling, and that's a mentality nowadays I like a lot because, you can go to, and then it's fortunate because I tattoo, so I tattoo a lot of people or instructors at other schools, so I'm lucky that I can go in and just kind of roll, and not everyone's going to be going, let's kill that guy,
Yeah.
And if I go to another school, I have, it's nothing but respect, because I hate those guys that come into our school that from somewhere else, and it's like they're coming in for blood, and you're just like, man, it's like, you got to respect where you're going, and honestly, and I've been here for probably about 3 years now, 3 or 4 years, I think. Rolling with Josh is awesome, man. You've taught me so much. It's a different day, because
I think the whole thing has evolved from when it first started. I mean, the first time I went to Hickson's at the Pacific Palisades place, I was a white belt. Did I even have I don't even know if I had a stripe, but because I got the okey doke from Scott, who knew Hickson. Scott was one of Hickson's blue belts at the time. We got looked after pretty well. And I'd done a couple of privates with one of Hickson's black belts, Limon. and Luis Herrera, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you come to competition training for the blue belts?" And I was like, "Yeah, cool." And he's like, "Hey, man, just so you know, if you tap a blue belt, you get his belt." And I was like, "For real?" And back then at Hickson's place, that was legit. Like, if you sub the blue belt,
got to give you the belt.
it was like a major fucking dishonorable thing. Like, the blue belt had to take his belt off in front of the class and hand it to the
That's a lot of fucking pressure.
So it was a fucking meat grinder back then. Now, I'm glad to see that some of that kind of machismo has gotten out of it.
Machismo is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I mean, the belt whoopings. I mean, I think my last one was like my purple belt, and then I was like, yeah, fuck that. We're not doing that anymore. That's just some hazing bullshit,
Yeah.
That's some crazy Brazilian hazing bullshit. Like, well, we don't need to do that. So, I mean, it is a kinder, gentler jiu-jitsu now, and especially for middle-aged guys to still be able to do it. I mean, that's what you want. I mean, we've probably said in here before, Chris Howder's quote about it's not who's best, it's who's left, and that's jiu-jitsu to a T. Like, we want to be able to do this the next 20 years,
I'm learning that probably about 5 years ago. It was pretty hard because it was like, like when you're used to being like, you're like, I'm the tough guy in the gym, I'm good. And then all of a sudden the other guys are younger and faster and they start getting tougher. And you're just like, I can't keep up. And then you realize you're like, wait, I'm getting slower. Or wait, when I get hurt, it takes a whole lot longer to heal. And now it's just like, all right, I just want to roll. I'm not. If it was a meme that you sent me where it's like the 40-plus-year-old guy who's just happy to be on the mat.
Yeah,
that's this guy. Like I'm at a point. I know. I'm well aware that like martial arts, fighting, and jiu-jitsu is more. I mean, it's a hobby. It's something that I love and live by. But yeah, I'm not like a professional. I'll leave that to the art. That's what I have to focus on, and that's what happened. Like back when I think it was in '01. I did a couple fights over at, I don't think it was called Bourbon Street back then. It was something else before.
Club Amnesia.
Oh, it brings me the fucking place, man. That fucking place was
if you haven't watched the Houston Alexander episode, he goes into of our podcast, he goes into some great memories of the whole Club Amnesia, because that's where he basically
that's where he got his start. I remember watching him, that motherfucker fighting in there. He was
couple times
brutal. I just remember like I did a fight there, and of course, I was a little sauced, but then the guy I was fighting was really sauced, I think. And I remember that first time I was like, I've never, everything I've done is very, organized, and I was like, yeah, I'll fight you, and I went in and I knocked the guy good and knocked him out, and then I was just like, I'm a fucking badass, which, every time I do that, I always fall on my face at some point.
Karma comes back and snatches you back to earth.
Because I remember, I think it was like the next Tuesday I came in, I decided to fight, and I think I got choked out within like the first like, I don't know, minute or 2 minutes or something like that, or I tapped out. I didn't get choked unconscious, but the thing is I would be apprenticing at the tattoo. I was fucking nuts then because I'd be working in the morning. I'd get up early in the morning, go teach at Pack Juvenile Delinquent School. I was teaching art there for a little bit, and then I'd go straight from there to work on my apprenticeship at Liquid Courage at the time. And I'd apprentice all day. And then after that, and on Tuesdays, I would shoot over to Club Amnesia, and I would try to go do a fight, have a couple drinks. Then after that, I'd shoot to UPS, and I'd work till 3 or 4 in the morning.
Oh, shit.
Come home, sleep 2 hours. I did that for damn near 2 years, I think. I mean, I remember I was apprenticing, and they kind of got me tattooing a little earlier because I think they felt bad for me. But after a while, when I started hallucinating, they were just like, okay, you're going to get paid for this.
Yeah.
I wanted it bad enough. But then I do remember at one point I came to work, and, it was a fucking mess because I came to work and I had a busted hand, but I was like, I can't show them. I'm still going to tattoo. I'll be fine. Well, I'm tough, you know. And I was just like, all right, I did. And then Jonna, at the time, one of the bosses there, she's awesome, but she was just like, yeah, but she can be salty. Yeah, I just remember she was like, damn, and I was like, yeah. And she's like, you got two choices to make, or you got a choice to make. You got a choice to make. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? She's like, you could tattoo, or you could go fight, but you aren't doing both like that. And I was just like, well, I go, and then I remember I was like, well, you know, come with me. There's fights tonight. And I was like, well, I'm definitely not fighting. But I'm like, come with me. There's fights tonight. Let's just watch them. You guys like that stuff. So I remember after work, we went there, and I remember being there. The fights are going on. We were all hanging out, having some drinks. And then I remember this Native American kid who fought a couple times. I just remember he had a Sitting Bull tattoo on his back. Nice guy. But then he was going to fight your Thai guy. Who's the guy that you brought in?
Yeah, Kong Nepal. We talked about
that. Oh, my God. So I'm looking at that guy, and I'm going, and he's like, he's got this like nice smile. Yeah. He looks nice, but then I'm looking at the motherfucker's ears and his shins and seeing how big his calves are, and I'm just like, this dude's a beast. Like, you know, and he's all like smiling, and I'm like, I told the Native American kid, I can't remember what his name was. He was a nice guy, but I was like, hey man, you might be careful and not do this right, you know. And I was like, I'm pretty sure that this guy's a pro, you know. I'm just looking out for you. Like this is, I'll be fine. And I was like, all right, you know. And then I remember the fight started, and the kid was, you know, he was doing pretty good running around, but I remember those kicks, man. And your guy was kicking, and I remember him hitting the corner at one point, and it was like, I felt bad for the corner of the ring, you know, after taking a kick from it. But, and then fucking all shit goes crazy. Some dude's fucking, some dude starts punching some girl. Then a gun's being pulled. Shit, everybody's going crazy or whatever.
Wild, man.
I remember I grabbed, because this gun stuff and all that, or the gun stuff hadn't happened yet, but some guy was hitting a girl. And I remember I grabbed some other guy to pull him off because, you know, and then I felt like a gun on him, and I'm like, "Ooh, I'm out of here," you know. And I just kind of do a Homer Simpson into the crowd, you know. And I was just like, I remember grabbing Jonna. It was her girlfriend at the time, and we that wrote it off. I'm not fighting. I was just like, and I'm like, yeah, tattooing's better.
But you know how many,
much better at drawing than fighting.
You know how many fighters from around the Midwest actually got their start there?
Yeah.
I mean, Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
Pat would always bring guys down. I mean, like some of these guys that went on to have crazy successful careers, because
it was the Wild West. It was pretty.
No weight divisions. Like just sign up right there on the night. Yeah, I think I'll fight. Or they'd make announcements. We need someone around like 200-ish. To fight in an hour, and then you usually have some guy. I think I'm like 200.
Dude, it was horrible because you'd see these guys who were pretty much like trained fighters just fighting some drunk guy in the crowd. I remember that. I think the first one I had, the kid or some guy was just like, "Hey man, how much do you weigh?" And I was like, at the time, I think I was like 170, 175. He's like, "Oh, awesome! You know, we're about the same weight. You want to fight?" And I was like, "Yeah." I like fighting. Why not? Let's give it a try. Let's give it a go. He's like, I don't really have much training. And then he comes in there with the whole jiu-jitsu. And I'm like, oh, I'm fucked, man. You know, he's got like a Gracie something. I'm like, oh shit. But you know, I just remember that one. That one I actually, luckily, I don't know how, won that one. But it was just like, yeah, I think I did three fights there total, and that was probably it. That was it. Yeah, my employers at the time put a kibosh to that.
I almost think they should bring that back, where you could just fight random people out of the audience, because many people think they can fight. And you see the difference between somebody who thinks they can fight and somebody who actually can.
You know, the craziest thing that I always remember about those fights is when you would get the guys that from UNO that were wrestlers. And back then, UNO had a national championship team. So you'd get these kids who'd graduated, All-American, and they're still living around Omaha, and they're sitting there going, I don't know how to punch, but I can pick a guy up. Well, we had no padding in that ring. It was a boxing ring, and there was no padding whatsoever. And so you'd see these guys pick some guy that was going to give it a go. These high-level wrestlers with no other skill other than wrestling. And they would just beanbag toss this guy, man. They'd pick him up and toss him again. And just toss him again. And I'm just like, someone is going to die in this stuff. And it was our ring. I always had nothing, I've said it before, I had nothing to do with it. I told the two guys that were doing it from my gym, I was like, you guys can rent my ring. I don't want my name appearing on anything. And most times I was sitting by the door in case shit went bad, and I'd just walk out into that parking lot on Center Street. You could see it coming, and I'm like, that's enough for tonight.
I remember the first time, or not the first time, one of the times I was rolling with Seth, we were rolling in the ring or whatever, and we brought something up about those days, and you were like, yeah, this was the ring that was in there, and I was like, that's so crazy, because I probably fought
full
people
circle
in this ring.
Yeah.
Probably drunk, but yes, I did, you know. It's crazy. It's crazy, the history of it, you know, and I love it, but it's so funny how your older age, like how it transitions, because I got into it because I wanted to protect myself. Then I want to be a badass. And then, you know, the more you learn, the more, you know, respect you have for it, and the respect that you have for people who know. And then it becomes something where it's not even about fighting. It's just a way of life. And now it's just like, you know, if I have a week where I don't get to do jujitsu or roll, or, you know, I feel depressed, you know. Now it's just, it's to maintain, keep me in shape, and
it's a way of life.
You know, I mean, I feel good. I'm 46 years old. You know, I have some health issues, but the thing about it is, aside from that, you know, I think I'm in better shape than I was graduating high school. You know, and it's all because, you know, predominantly jiu-jitsu. I love the Indonesian silat. I love all the different things, you know, and then it's just kind of cool because, like, you know, to look back and then realize all the people, and thanks to Dean a lot, I got to meet a lot of major players that I didn't know were major players till later, you know, or like, I mean, I think we were in LA and I was at the Wild Card on all fours in a dingy closet with Freddie Roach digging on the ground looking for a large t-shirt or something like that, you know, and it was just like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm fucking digging in a closet with Freddie Roach. This is crazy, you know, like, but yeah, I mean, just, you know, it's cool, you know, that I got to do that. And I do, some days it's always like, man, I wish I would have, like, you know, did my hand at fighting. But, you know, I have no regrets. I'm pretty happy that martial arts has brought me what it has. Because, I mean, if it wasn't for martial arts, then I don't think I would be where I am with tattooing and with art. Because I cross-market the two a lot, you know. You know, I use my methods of how I would train with martial arts on how I would, if there's something I can't draw, I get obsessed with it. So then I keep practicing it, trial, and then, you know, and then as I do the movement, it's like, if I mess something up, I start all over again. And then I, you know, because I figure every time I practice, and then you get good, and eventually, you know, you get profound at what it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, that's something I wanted to talk about. So you talked about finally decided you are going to draw. You're going to tattoo instead of fighting.
Yes,
right?
sir.
Make more money with your art than your fists. How did that look at the beginning? How did you end up getting started? And then I think more interestingly, one of the things I've noticed about you is, you know, a lot of tattoo artists, they kind of have to do the little work, right? The girl comes in and wants the bumblebee tattoo or the Asian letters or whatever. You, it seems, exclusively get a tattoo in your style. So I'll try to make these questions better. How did you develop your style, and how did you get your business to the point where you just do your style and really nothing else?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, I guess one crossover is like when you're training, you're trying to think of, you start to think, you know, I realized that if I took unorthodox approaches, you know, like incorporating a little bit of a capoeira twist to a jiu-jitsu move, it catches them off guard, so then it opens up with what I want, you know. I used to kind of cross things and think about that. And I remember when I started tattooing, I remember my mentor at the time, he was just like, you probably wise, and then he's probably just looking out for me, but he was like, it's probably wise not to draw on a style. And I just was like, oh yeah. And he was like, you want to kind of know how to do everything, and back then tattooing wasn't as popular as it is now. And I just remember I was trying to think about the angles because I feel like there's different types of luck. It's like, we've talked about this. You just got dumb luck, which I never account on. You got the luck of the odds. You have enough hands stirring pots, something's going to kick off. Then I think of the luck of leverage. And so I was kind of thinking in my head, and when he told me that, I was like, well, I heard that tattooing is going to be on TV eventually, and I was like, wouldn't it be smarter if you were just profound at one or two things instead of, everything and being average at everything? Because, then you're going to stand out from the rest because it's going to saturate. And then eventually I decided to take it one step further, and I was like, you know what, I'm actually going to hone in on my style and focus on it and refine it, because then eventually I'll be the only one that can do it. And then if anyone wants it, they have to come to me to get it. So then it's securing my future in that sense. So I went against the odds, and I decided to kind of push forward with that, and just kind of what I would do is if somebody would come in back then, the popular thing was like, what was it? Barbed wire armbands or the tramp stamps. And so when a woman would come in and be like, I want this on my lower back, and I'd be like, all right, let's think of a way to do this where it's different and it's yours. And so I'd put like an Art Nouveau twist, or I would try to take everybody's like ideas, even if it wasn't something I was into, and try to accentuate it and put my touch to it. And the funny thing is, eventually they would just come back to me and want me to just do my thing and give me more freedom. And I started to realize that, like, the more I would, try to help them to make something original, just theirs, then eventually they would just trust me and they started coming back. And then, of course, treating them nice, and then eventually, it's funny because I got one guy I train with, and he's got like a back piece. Andy Cowell's his name. He's got a back piece of like these orchids that we did on him, and it was like 22 years ago. And here I am recovering the whole thing with a new back piece. It's just like, I've got a lot of these pieces that I started, the lower back pieces. Now I'm covering them with giant back pieces, and so I'm lucky it secured it. But you figure if you got the leverage and the angle, and then you also add the hard work, I like drawing. I like hard work. So
you definitely have a distinct style. I think
thank you.
We've been fortunate in here to, have a bunch of very talented tattoo artists, and it's probably not a great thing, but I know you and I have talked about this, where you find yourself becoming a tattoo snob.
Oh yeah.
And, especially like when I'm down in Mexico, it's probably the place where my shirt's off the most. I'm walking by the pool and I'm like, ugh. But then I can also look at somebody and go, that a Koenig piece? Yeah. Now, is that a set? Like you just
start recognizing
you can recognize
the
these styles on people, and it's wild because there's definitely a uniqueness about what you do.
Thank you.
To me, it always looks like you're using a Japanese calligraphy.
That's a big influence. Yeah.
Brush.
Art Nouveau, Japanese, like that flow.
Yeah.
It's so funny that you say that too, because my main instructor, Dean Truax, he's I'm tattooing him tomorrow. It's going to be his birthday this weekend, and it's giving him his second tattoo. But the funny thing is, he's like, "Well, I'm new at this, so could you show me? Could you, I'm new at this." I'm like, Dean, you know how many tattooers you know, and you've known me for 20 years. I was like, "You're a tattoo snob, He's like, it's true. I can see all the bad tattoos out there. And I was just like, you're around it enough. You don't necessarily need the tattoos to know.
My wife was funny because I'll tell the podcast viewers, but Dave did my motorcycle. And so she's like, what's he going to do? And I said, I have no idea. And she was, you just fucking turned over your bike to someone? And I'm like, it'll be cool.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what is it? And I'm like, I don't know. We kind of talked about a couple things. And she's like, you don't have a proof? And I was like, Yeah, you don't really get a proof with Dave Koenig. You get the finished product, And I'm like, it'll be cool, don't worry. And she just couldn't believe that there was no like, well, this is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. You got to do it step by step.
And then she's like, and when will it be done? I was like, whenever it's done. She was like, don't you want to write? I was like, you don't hurry an artist. No. Like if you give someone like Koenig these tanks, it's like, can't wait till they're finished. But that doesn't mean I can't wait. Yeah. Like, just get it done and no problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's now and then, of course, when I got them, she's like, "That's fucking badass." That's awesome. I was like, I told you. That's awesome. She's like, "You guys didn't draw this out." I go, "No." I go, "It was just whatever."
Yeah, I think I had the concept, and then I just started pretty much painting on the tank and going from there. That thing was a learning lesson on that too.
Because that was the first one you've done, right?
Well, I painted a couple different like motorcycle tanks, but I haven't been successful at it. But luckily, I've had that practice. So then when you asked me, I was like, I know what to do with this, And then I was thinking about like when you initially asked me, I was like, well, he's a fighter, but I know he's from Ireland. They got that kind of old pugilist timey thing, and you mentioned possibly one of those. And then I was like, I'm not gonna do flames or anything. I want something that has that antiquity. And then I started thinking about like old guns when they have the scroll work engraved in them. Yeah. And I was like, well, I can't really engrave on his tank, but I can definitely paint some scroll work, and let's do it in a real cool fashion so it has that vibe. And yeah, I was pretty happy with how it turned out. It was fun.
It's pretty cool. Even with like my chest piece, we started training. You're like, hey, I'll tattoo you for training, and I was like, cool. I'll figure something out. Well, I wanted like a Stevie Ray Vaughan throwback, so I'm thinking chest piece, peacock, right? And I'm like, so yeah, let's do a chest piece. I'm like, cool. So I remember I was getting around in my bathroom, and this text came through, and he's like, and you said, I know you wanted a chest piece, but what do you think of this? And I pulled it up, and there was a picture I had taken of my full torso, and you had superimposed over it this peacock that literally took up my entire torso and my entire down to one of my knees on my leg. And I'm like, well, yeah, if you want to put all that on me, great, let's do it. But it was one of those things where I was like, oh, I might have bitten off more than I can chew here.
Did you have any tattoos when you came to the gym?
Yes, I had some crappy ones that I got back in when I was like 18. Okay. So I had my knuckles, and I had little ones here and one on my spine. But I've had these both covered up, and eventually I'll have the one on my spine covered up.
My first was Chris from Big Brain.
Oh, yeah, Chris Blinston.
Oh, my God,
Chris is awesome. I love that dude.
He had a fucking hammer of a hand, and it was my first tattoo.
He's got a hammer of an arm.
Yeah, I mean, the big
motherfucker's biceps bigger than my head.
But I'm sitting there, and
I said it, Chris.
All I want is the gym logo. But I wanted a white tattoo, and I thought at some point I'd get a tattoo. I was playing at an Irish festival, and there was this fiddle player from, I think she was from France, playing with this Irish band. It's famous. I can't remember the name of the band now, but they're pretty famous. She happens to be smoking hot too. But I'm standing at the stage, and now when I think back, I'm sure she thought, "This is fucking perv doing." But I'm looking at her arm, and she's got knotwork around her arm, but it's white, and I'd never seen a white tattoo that almost looked like a brand, And so I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like this close, and she just kind of looks at me, lowers her head down where her chest was, and eyeballs, and I'm like, oh my God, this woman thinks I was staring at her boobs. I'm like, I am so sorry. I'm like, I was looking at your tattoo, and obviously I'm not the first guy that got busted doing it.
Sure, you're
She's
not going to believe me.
Yeah, it's white. And I was like, yeah. I go, I've never seen a white tattoo. So when Chris said, all right, let's get you a tattoo, I was like, white. And he's like, really? And I was like, yeah. And man, he fucking...
I was going to say, if he's doing white, and then he's going to bury that motherfucker and get it in there.
It hurts so bad.
And that's the hard part with white is, you never know. I mean, with the titanium white that's in white pigment reacts differently to different people. And I can't say it's tainted by the plasma or what, but sometimes it turns like, I always say baby diarrhea yellow, you know? So it's like, we're always like, you get these girls that come in, you know, not saying it's all girls, you know, like guys and girls, but people will come in and they'll be like, I just want this white tattoo right here. And I'm always like, all right, I got to give you a heads up. I'm going to bury this. I'm going to make sure that white's in there. There is a chance it's going to turn diarrhea yellow. There's like, but you know.
Well, he buried it because I'm sitting there at one point, and I knew him pretty well, obviously, and I'm like, man, you sure you know what you're doing? And he's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm like, is this supposed to hurt this bad? And he's like, no, it doesn't hurt. And I'm like, all right, fucking, I bare knuckle this and Muay Thai that. And I'm like, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to sit through in my life. And like sweat's pouring. I had my hands in my armpits and just sweat is pouring out of me. And I feel like he's tattooed my whole back. And I get done and spins me around the old big brain shop. Yeah. And there's this little tattoo. I was like, that's it? It looks great, but fuck that. I'm never doing this again.
Well, it's funny. It's funny because some of the tough guys I get, they're the ones that are always passing out or having troubles. You know, that's why when I tattooed Durkin or Patrick Cummins, you know, he's got some small tattoos. You know, and he was like, I want you to do my whole leg, and I'm like, all right, I'll do your leg, man. And he's a great dude, you know, and he flies out and he's like, and I showed him the design, and he's like, cool, let's do it. And I remember he sat in the chair. And he's the reason I grew the stash, by the way. But and I didn't have the stash at the time. And he's got that big stash, and he sits in the chair, and I just look at him and his big fucking cookie duster, and I was just like, I know you're tough, but are you tattoo tough? Like this, and he's like, all right, like this. We tattooed him for like 8.5 hours straight. His whole fucking leg were going, and I'd be like, you know, and the worst is I'm getting tired. My hands getting tired, and I'm like, how you doing, big guy? He's like, I'm good. Yeah. You know, he smiles, and I'm just like, all right, you know, but then I think after like 8.5 hours, I was like, all right, dude, all right, I'm tapping. You know, I was like, my arm is tired. I have tunnel vision. Yeah, we're done for the day. You know, I was like, you're clearly tattoo tough. You know. But it is funny though, because like I'll have some guys that are the toughest guys I know, and they'll come in and they'll be like, why is this hurt so bad, you know? But then it's also like, I mean, well, it's also where you're getting tattooed. I mean, like you're getting your freaking sternum tattooed, and you're like, why does this suck so bad? I thought I was tougher than this. I'm like, you're getting your sternum hit, you know? It's just like, man, I don't know.
Yep.
Sorry, maybe you didn't want me to say
no, that's fine. Like I can normally go about 3 hours tattooing. About 3 hours, and I start to get grumpy. I'm like, you know, I'm not grumpy with the tattoo artist. I'm just grumpy in general. But that one day, especially over my ribs, the left side on my ribs.
The shit hurts there, man.
I made it 45 minutes. I was sweating through the paper underneath me. I'm like, I felt so bad because I felt like I was wasting your time. But, you know.
And the thing about it, though, is once you start getting large scale pieces, too, then you start realizing that you have on days and off days, you know. I mean, it's just like anything. You know, all of a sudden, if you don't sleep well, or if you don't eat well, or whatever, then you're going to have a day where it's like, why does it hurt, you know, much more? I mean, I remember getting my ribs worked on once for 5+ hours, and I was like, I'm a beast, you know, and then a month later, I could only sit for half an hour on it. You know, I was like, I'm a pussy, you know, and it's just like, so yeah, you know, anytime, that's I guess that's the theme for this. Anytime I think I'm tough or awesome, I got to realize I'm not, because it's like something, you know, karma will catch me.
Yeah. So when it comes to tattooing and improvement, one of the things that I've kind of noticed and appreciate about you is you're very focused on being very good, right? Some people get to a certain level, they just kind of train off. They just kind of rest on their laurels. And I don't see you doing that at all. How do you go about, you know, you reached a really high level already. How do you go about improving from there? And especially with something that's like a solo endeavor. Because, you know, for me personally, training jiu-jitsu, I've been playing guitar for almost 3 decades now. I've been training jiu-jitsu for about 12 years. And I realized about halfway through my jiu-jitsu journey, I was better at jiu-jitsu than I was at guitar. And I realized it's because guitar, you can do it all by yourself. And so you're not forced to work on the things that you're not good at. You can just avoid them. In jiu-jitsu, you can't hide from that. You've got, you know, if you've got an opponent, they're going to try to exploit your weaknesses. So with that in mind, you know, the fact that drawing is kind of an individual thing, you're doing it all by yourself. How do you get better? How do you focus on proving what's already a really strong skill set?
Well, that's a hard part. I guess I'm just thinking like when it comes even to like social media, you know, we're exposed every day to the best tattoos being done now. We see it all, and there are so many that I just think are even better than me, that are amazing, and there always is going to be, you know, there's always a tougher guy, you know. But the thing is like I, you know, sometimes I'll get into a funk because then I find myself, you know, they're doing such great work, and then I'm realizing I'm like, oh, I'm depressed because I'm competing with them. I'm not competing with myself, and that goes against, because from the get go, I always think, you know, with nothing, you know, with nothing to prove, there's nothing to lose. So in my sense, I just kind of go, all right, I don't have to compete with, you know, other people. I mean, you know, so I'm just kind of like, when I draw, I just figure it's just like anything. As long as the next time I do it, it's better than the last time I do it. So every time I do any piece or drawing or whatever, it's like, okay, like I drew right before here, I was drawing a Asian style dragon, and it's like, you know, I can draw one pretty much in my sleep. But the thing is now I'm like, okay, I want to take this angle and angle it this way, or try something different to challenge myself, because I want to keep growing, and I want to be better each time. And if you only compete with yourself, you know, then eventually you'll be the one setting the bar rather than chasing it. Okay. You know, it just seems that way to me, or that's how it works for me. It might not for everybody, but even in, you know, jiu-jitsu, I noticed that like, instead of constantly feeling like I gotta win. I mean, I remember the day that like something hit, and I think that was when Dean goes. I remember him. I started grappling, and you know, I think I was like very like, oh, I gotta win and whatever. But the day that I just, you know, we started, I tapped in with this guy, and I just laid on my side and let him get on top. And he goes, "There it is. You finally get it." And after that was then, you know, I was getting a blue belt, and then I advanced kind of quick, you know, and I actually feel kind of like I don't deserve it, you know, because it advanced so quick. But I realized, I was like, don't worry about beating them. You know, worry about beating what you did last time. And then eventually you'll just be able to beat everybody, you know, because then, you know, I can't be the, you know, if I see other tattooers or artists that are the best, I can't ever be them. If I'm competing with them, then I'm just trying to be them, and they're going to be the best at being them.
Or you're trying to copy them.
Exactly.
Yeah, which in your world, you don't want to be that guy.
Oh, yeah, no.
It's
plagiarize.
Like, totally, yeah.
So if I just compete with myself, you know, and then, you know, I work on doing it that way, because with my work, we are kind of, I don't know, stuck within certain subject matters, you know, like, I mean, I can't tell you how many ladies or the pugilist fighters or dragons I've drawn, you know, and I'm going to end up still having to draw them. So now, I mean, I think that's what's challenging, is now I get to think of like, how do I do it a little different? How do I make this one better? What elements can I take from this? Or what elements that I abandon that I can implement back into it, you know? And jiu-jitsu is like that. There's movements I learned that I thought would never work, and now they're my favorite. And then there's ones I abandoned, but then years later it comes back into my game, you know? And, you know, it's just, I love it. It's just ever flowing, you know?
Yeah, that's neat. And I feel the same way. You know, I hurt my thumb a couple weeks ago, and so I've been rolling, and, you know, I've just been not using my left hand because my thumb hurts. And I'm starting to figure some stuff out that I hadn't figured out before. It's almost like you need to, like you said, you're kind of doing the same old thing, the thing you've been doing forever. You're just trying to find a new fold and trying to improve it every single time, which is rare in this world. I feel like, you know, a lot of people get a job, and then they learn how to do the job, and then they just kind of sit at that level, or they learn how to do anything and they just kind of stay at this level. They never really push themselves, or
I think people get content. I don't get content. Yeah. I don't understand. I mean, why do something if you don't want to be the best at it, in the best version of you at it, you know? I mean, and then I'm kind of a minimalist, so it's like I might as well just pick the things I really want to advance at. And, you know, of course, that's painting, drawing, you know, tattooing. And then you know, martial arts, you know I'm not going to be the best at it, but I want to be the best I can be at it.
Yeah.
I don't, I don't know. I don't understand people when they half-ass things or get into it.
Yeah. Well, I remember one story you told me about a comet. Remember the comet story about seeing something about a comet was going to hit the Earth?
Yeah.
And that was kind of an inspiring story for me, if you don't mind sharing, like
Really?
the thought process behind it.
Oh my gosh. I'm trying to think of a good way to tell the story so I don't sound ridiculous. But yeah, so I don't know. I think I was maybe like in first grade, something like that. I just remember like something on the news, or not news. They were talking about some comet that was heading to the Earth, and supposedly in 2024 it was supposed to make contact. If they don't do something, it could knock the Earth off its 23 degree axis or whatever and cause everything to go. And I just remember like at a young age being scared to death of that. I was like, oh my God, and it is what it is. So I don't know if the story starts there, but that's kind of the background of that comment thing, or the comment. But I've been on a kick. I've been on a kick where I've been reading a lot of books about like time is the only true currency, death, things like that. But I was just thinking about it, and I was like, well, what if that's true? And I remember being a little kid, I was imagining myself like in 2024. I saw myself with white hair in a house alone for some reason. I don't know, with a walker. But yeah, I realized when I was driving in the car, I don't know, this was probably about almost 7-8 months ago, I think. And then I was like, that story came up in my head, and I was thinking about it. And then I was like, oh, well, what if, like, say this is my last year, what would I do different? And then I realized I was like, I got to really look at it that way. Now, I'm going to pretend that it's not the end of the world for everybody. I'm going to pretend that by the end of this year, I'm done. I'm gone. And so then it put everything into a different perspective to me. It was just like, okay, the time I spend with my boys got to be more quality. The time that I spend with my wife has got to be more quality. Like, how do I do things? Okay, where's my finances at? Where's this? What am I doing with my art? And I realized, there's a certain point in your career that, instead of performing, you have to start teaching. And, I'm probably at that point where it's like, I need to share the knowledge that I've obtained, because I feel like everything in life, is about, kind of about relationships helping each other. And it's about knowledge, how much knowledge and things can you do? Because, tattooing, martial arts is bigger than us, So what do you bring to the table to give back for the art to live on, And so it's kind of like, all right, maybe I should start sharing knowledge, doing this. And I had a high fear of, I've been asked to be interviewed and be on podcasts and stuff in the past, but I've always been like, no, I don't want to do that. Maybe I was like, not my thing. And then I realized one of the things I should do is pretty much like open up to that, put that out there, because, if I was gone in a year, I want my son to look back and be like, my dad wasn't such a dipshit, but it's just, it's what you leave behind.
Yeah, but stories are how cultures survive. We just have a different media. We're not sitting around a campfire outside of a cave anymore doing that, or there's no traveling storyteller going from village to village.
That's right.
Now, we're using technology as our storytelling.
Always recorded.
Yeah,
forever.
And we get to go back. I mean, before we started season 2, I went back and I rewatched all of season 1 because I'm always kind of worried about, what's out there? Like, how did that? It sounded good when we did it and said it, and did it really? And but we were getting so many cool random messages and stuff going, hey man, I didn't know you had a podcast. I just listened to this, and I'm in Canada, and I'm in here, and I'm in Australia, and I'm like, what the fuck?
It's crazy. You're
like, how cool is that?
Far.
And that's when we were like, all right, man, we gotta do this. But your story gets to, obviously, it's indelible in art and all of that stuff. But the spoken word doesn't fade.
Yeah.
You know, the sun is going to fade your tattoo. You know, your tattoo that you got in your 20s is not going to look so great when you're 80.
Yeah.
But it looked like you had some big black marks on your arm, maybe. Yeah. But the spoken word, that doesn't decay.
Well, and then once it's out essentially in the blockchain, it's going to resonate. You know, it's always going to be there somewhere, you know. Which I think the intimidating thing for me in the past was thinking about, like, if I make myself sound like an asshole or do something stupid, you know. But now I realize that as I'm getting older, I don't care. You know, I'm just like, you know, I'm just going to be me. And I feel like my heart is in the right place. Hopefully my brain will catch up. But you know, I'm just going to, you know, be myself. And yeah, I did that with the podcast. I was on Chats and Tats with Aaron Delavadova, and that was my first one, and you remember how nervous I was. I mean, I remember telling you about it. I'm like, I don't know, and you were like, just do this. But I remember, it was like, I'm going to go in there. I'm just going to be me, because if I try to look cool, I'm going to look dumb. If I try to sound cool, I'm going to sound dumb. You know? I don't know.
Well, you talked about, you know, potentially, you know, going from performing to teaching, so to speak. And you and I have talked a little bit about that might be on the horizon. What we're kind of running out of time. I don't want to keep you too long, but what do you think? What do you see happening in the next couple of years? Do you think you might take on some apprentices? You think any big projects you're going to be working on? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I've taken this year to do a lot of traveling. I've had some international traveling this year. Next year, I think I have a little bit. I've taken on a few conventions where I'm doing seminars. But I know that I wanted to come out last year with a book with the last like 20 something years of tattooing, but now I'm waiting. I'm probably going to come out with a book in 2026 that will be, you know, I was planning to call it Old Bellows to Mend, you know, and basically, you know, it's the old bellows, you know, when the old fighters would start to get old, their lungs would get tired, they'd be like, he's got old bellows, like the organ, like you were saying. And so I always wanted to do the book, and basically it will just be, now I'm going to do a quarter century of work, you know, even stuff not super proud of, I'm going to put it in there, and then I'll have some copy with it. I've written some stuff that's more directed towards, you know, my son, but we'll see what comes out with that. I've got a few other projects coming on. You know, one of these days we'll pursue the Old Bellows jiu-jitsu gear and get that going and moving more. Yeah, I mean, you know, at some point I'm just doing what I do, and I got to make sure I'm always having fun doing it if I can. I mean, there's going to be times that you know, you don't like what you're doing. I mean, sometimes you have to do it, you know, but, you know, it's like, I want to draw, I want to create, and then whatever I can do to help with that, I will, you know. I've had a few charitable things I'm kind of working on too with my art, but we'll see how that pulls off.
Okay.
I'm talking a few things, but I'll let you know more when I have more information.
Okay. Awesome. Well, where can people find you online? You have a pretty active social media, pretty popular social media. So where can people find you?
You can go to my website, pretty much connects to my YouTube and my Instagram. My website is dkoenigart.com. So it's DKOENIG art.com. Or you can go to my Instagram, which is Dave Koenig Art, or at Dave Koenig Art. The YouTube, I don't remember what the name is. And then I just kind of opened a TikTok not too long ago, but I'm kind of absent from there a lot. It's hard for me to keep up with all the different.
There's a lot of them out there. So
there is, and I mean, and it's great because it's done my career wonders, you know. But I can be from the Midwest and be busy out in Italy when tattooing. You know, it's just like, yeah.
That's one question I wanted to ask. Where's some of the craziest places you've seen your artwork? Didn't somebody just see something out in a different country? It was a poster for the Omaha Whiskey Fest. Somebody just tagged you in that.
Yeah, somebody tagged me on that one, and I can't remember where that was. I had last year that Dublin, when I did the Dublin tattoo convention poster, a buddy of mine was like, text me. He was like, I've been busting my ass to get out of Omaha. We fly all the way to Dublin, and now I'm in Omaha again. And I had my artwork was in all the pubs and on signs. And then, you know, I mean, I've had I had artwork. I think I was in the Paris airport. And I'm walking, and then there's a big piece of mine with, like, for a show in France. And then, I'm going out to Chaudzeg, France, and you're driving. They got my artwork hanging above the street. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. I'm like, this is awesome, So it's definitely made its rounds. Or I had one girl think I was a creeper because I was in France, I think in Limoges, France, and she had one of my shirts on and from Curbside Clothing, and I was like, I thought she was there for the convention. Maybe she knew who I was, and I was like, like, nice shirt. I couldn't, say it in French, and she just looked at me like,
yeah, you're sitting there going like this to this girl,
you fucking creeper, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that came out wrong, but it was still cool as shit, man. I mean, I don't know, it's crazy to see it get around like that. I'm very fortunate, and I just work my ass off and enjoy it, and
the Curbside Clothing, is that the rock icons thing and the hip hop icons tattoo?
No, they Curbside Clothing was originally from Omaha, and they just got like a collaborative of artists that they kind of put together, and then everybody has their own shirts. I have a bunch of designs.
The Tupac thing?
No, so now that I did on my own website. So okay. On my own website, like, okay, and you have to be a little careful because when I did the Star Wars ones, it was like, you can only make so much, and I don't want people coming at me with copyright infringement or anything like that. I know there's probably a little harder with the Tupac and with the Biggie Smalls that I did, but I did those and a Madonna one, and and I would just do 2-day sale. Yep. So I would I don't think I even made much money from it at all, but it was just fun to do.
I saw that T-shirt, and I still have it, and it was like a limited run, right? It was just, and I get on there, and I'm like, Dave Koenig. Fucking name sounds so familiar. It's my pugilist dementia kicking in. And then once I actually got it and looked at the scroll work on Tupac, I was like, oh, that Dave Koenig. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I redid all the tattoos on Tupac and in my style. But it was funny because I worked at Tattoo the Lou tattoo convention in St. Louis. And I did like the show poster, and then I came there and I put up online, I was like, I will only have these shirts at this show. That's the only way you can get them besides having it for 1 day or 2 days online. I got to the show. I had people paying to get into the convention just to buy the shirt and leave.
Really?
Wow. Well, I know I've got an appointment here coming up, so I don't want to keep you too long. Thanks so much for coming on. Obviously, thanks for being a friend. I get a lot out of rolling with you, so I'm glad the feelings are reciprocal, and look forward to many years of tattoos and jiu-jitsu.
Dude, man, I fucking love you guys. You guys are awesome, and I have so much respect for both of you guys, and it's my honor to be on here with you guys. Man. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's
Thank you
ours.
for all the knowledge and everything, you guys.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you.
Awesome.
All right, we'll catch y'all later.